And it's not necessarily a fair position for us to criticize the press secretary because we know she's there to protect the President of the United States. She's there to answer these tough questions and to try and spin what's really unspinnable. But this is, again, just momentum that's been building really ever since Karine took over the press secretary job. And now there's very little she can do to sort of deflect all this incoming fire.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by White House reporter Christian Datoc. Christian, it's been an interesting week at the White House, and the White House press secretary has faced a lot of tough questions. Walk us through what these controversies have been a little bit.
Well, Karine Jean-Pierre is accustomed the press to sort of getting very little out of these daily press briefings that she's done over the past year and a half since taking over at the White House. But that frustration sort of boiled over as we've had this drip of information about President Biden's health after the debate. Now, earlier this week, a lot of reporters came in questioning the White House about a Parkinson's disease expert who public logs, keep in mind, was shown to have visiting the White House 8 times over 8 months between last year and this year.
Right.
We got the typical Karine runaround, and then later in that day, Dr. O'Connor, the White House physician, actually had said the president has been examined neurologically 3 times in office. None of these visits by Dr. Kennard, the Parkinson's expert, were to examine the president. And then the next day, we get more reporting that says, oh, actually, this Parkinson's expert did examine the president just at Walter Reed. So again, with everything that's been talked about, the White House and the campaign strategy of keeping Biden isolated, trying to deflect questions from his age, we've had this frustration bubbling over. And you can tell we've hit a breaking point when folks like CBS, the New York Times, the Associated Press, those folks in the front of the briefing room are asking not only hostile questions of the White House, but actively, tutting them, for lack of a better word, for effectively lying to the media and lying to the American people about the president.
Because they just don't seem to feel that she's been particularly forthcoming about any of this.
And it's not necessarily a fair position for us to criticize the press secretary because we know she's there to protect the President of the United States. She's there to answer these tough questions and to try and spin what's really unspinnable. But this is, again, just momentum that's been building really ever since Karine took over the press secretary job, and now there's very little she can do to sort of deflect all this incoming fire.
So President Biden is trying to deflect a lot of the incoming fire, and he's trying to hold on, and things within the Democratic Party are in such turmoil. Who's to know what'll even have happened by the time this video is posted? But at the moment, Biden's in the race, and he's trying to stay in the race. What are some of the things he's doing, 1, to reassure Democrats, and 2, maybe to fight back a little bit?
Well, I think the first thing is to come out and say, I hear all these rumors, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in the race, I'm the nominee, and I'm going to be on the ballot in November. Now, behind the scenes, he's been working the phones. He's met in person and had calls with nearly all of the Democratic governors. He's had calls with senior members of the Democratic congressional leadership team. He's met with Democratic mayors at the White House. He's done sit-down interviews, something we've rarely seen this president do over the last 4 years. The real question is just, is it enough at this point in time? Maybe if he had started doing this in April of 2023 when he announced his campaign, Democrats would have felt a little bit better about the elephant in the room, no pun intended,
right,
being Joe Biden's age and his ability to contend with Donald Trump in the general election. But the panic that we've seen from officials behind the scenes and in public over the past 2 weeks, since that debate again, I just don't think the president can really make those fears go away. And every day that we get closer to the convention is one that the Biden team is looking as a victory because they can check it off the wall, and it's just one day closer to him being nominated. That being said, those rumors aren't necessarily going away, especially when you've got now the first Democratic senator to come out and call for Biden to exit the race. You got George Clooney, a famous Hollywood fundraiser for not only Joe Biden, but Democrats over his career, come out and write an op-ed and say, look, it's time for Joe Biden to go. That's certainly not helping the president's case. So again, this video might be old by the time the press conference happens, but the White House and the campaign are looking at the NATO press conference that Biden is doing in D.C. as another one of those ways to tell not only Democratic voters, but Democratic Party power players, Joe Biden's our guy, and he needs to stay in the race if we want to win again in 2024 against Donald Trump.
So in most ways, former President Donald Trump is Biden and the Democrats' example of everything not to do. But Biden now finds himself in a situation where maybe he needs to emulate Trump a little bit.
I'm not sure if this is an active strategy from Joe Biden, but the resemblances to Joe Biden's strategy right now, be it attacking party elites, okay, calling into morning talk news shows.
Morning Joe specifically, which used to be a Trump favorite, not so much anymore.
Exactly. In 2016, they had him on 30 or 40 times for these phone interviews. These are actions that look a lot like they're taken right out of the Trump playbook. And when you ask the Biden team, campaign specifically, what do you make of this? They say, well, Joe Biden and Donald Trump couldn't be more different. They're polar opposites politically and morally, and as family men, I think the differences are clear. But to the discerning press, it's starting to look a lot like Biden in this panic mode where he's trying to circle the wagons, is really taking a lesson from his chief political rival.
So if Biden starts appearing on camera with alley cats, we'll know this is a clear-cut strategy.
Exactly.
Thank you, Christian. You can read Christian and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.